Right, hello and welcome back to what we will still call the TNC podcast, although it's slightly condensed for these strange times. And I'm delighted to be able to bring in a lovely transfer today. Chris Reever's out, Michael Bailey is in. Michael, how are you, mate?
Hello, good, thank you. I hope Chris is all right.
Chris
yeah,
is
good.
fine.
How are you?
Yeah, good. What's keeping you busy at the moment? I know you're still full-time on The Athletic and, of course, loads of great content out there. We've still got our discount codes. If people want access to The Athletic, the link to that will be in the description below for 50% off, which equates to about a cup of coffee a month or something.
It did.
Yeah.
It might be less than that in future. But that's a bigger discount than on our own On The Ball
Is
podcast.
it?
Yeah,
well, there we go.
40% on that.
There we go. So how's your last kind of couple of weeks been? Because although it feels like we've been in isolation for months, it still hasn't been that long, has it?
No, it scared me halfway through last week that it was about 10 days.
Yeah.
Because it was like, really? So it's been, it's been tough, I have to be honest. I mean, we've all got our own challenges, obviously, but I've got two gorgeous boys who are running around the house. I mean, it's a proper state. My wife is a primary school teacher, and she's trying to teach because she works part-time half the week. But, and other people will find this as well. If you've got two parents both supposedly working from home while looking after kids, then it's quite a balancing act, and what I mean is physically impossible. And so it's been an eye opener, but we have to make of it what we can and push on and sort of look after ourselves, really, don't we? So that's all we can do, and we try and do as much of that as possible. I probably need to do a few more Joe Wicks morning sessions. I think I'm letting myself down there.
Good stuff. I think you mentioned it off camera. Like, it feels as if everyone's got their own little issues that they're trying to deal with, whether that be they've lost their job or they're juggling childcare, whatever it is. It's not easy. Let's get on to some Norwich City chat. I'm trying not to kind of chat too much on the channel at the moment because there's such uncertainty surrounding things. But it feels as if the last week there's been plans put in place, and we can kind of figure out what's going on a little bit more. So we'll start with the furloughing of non-playing staff. Now, I know what furloughing is because it's happened to me myself. For the people that don't know, Michael, just explain what has happened with non-playing staff, what situation they find themselves in, what the club has done, etc.
Yeah, so I think at Norwich, it's a situation that's similar to, as you say, a lot of other businesses, but also a lot of football clubs. And I think it's probably worth pointing out there are clubs that have done this that haven't made it public as well. Essentially, the government, to try and keep everyone ticking over as best they can in this situation, they have agreed to pay employees 80% of their salary up to £2,500 a month, I think it is. So they've agreed to do that, which takes a huge burden off companies, say, who have lost all of their income through sales, purchases, through hosting events, which, if you think about it, is essentially what Norwich City Football Club are. So Norwich have decided to go along with that for people who are working. And I think it's worth adding that I believe when you're on this, you are not allowed to work. You have to physically stop working. You're not allowed to work. So it's therefore a question of doing it with people who physically haven't got anything to do. So I spoke to Paul Warren, who's the Rotherham manager, and obviously the kit man hasn't got anything to do because no players are in at training and stuff like that. So that's one of the situations. What Norwich are doing is they have agreed to make sure that they still pay the other 20%. And likewise, if someone is earning more than £2,500 a month, Norwich will top it up so no one actually has to take a pay cut. That is more than some clubs are doing. So that's a commitment there. I must admit, I don't even think I'd heard the word furlough until about 3 weeks ago. So we're all on a kind of learning journey with it all, I suppose. And it comes with great moral debate, because ultimately football clubs receive a hell of a lot of money, and some people are not particularly comfortable with the fact that the players are still being paid 100% of what they earn, because their contracts, it's really complicated. And I'll be honest, I'm not an expert, but if you're a playing member, then your contract is treated very differently. You're like a primary creditor for the business. I think that's the right way of putting it. So it's ring fenced, and whatever the players decide to do, if they decide to take pay cuts to help other people out, whichever, then it gets very complicated because these are huge earners, and the tax man and woman like to get involved in that, and it gets far beyond my pay grade in terms of what that actually means. So there's obviously one suggestion that players should be the ones to actually make sure that the other staff are still paid, as opposed to the government doing it, which is what's essentially happened. So that's one debate, and again, the Premier League have met this afternoon, and I think there's a commitment there to work out what to do going forwards, but no concrete action. And when you have politicians saying that Premier League players have got to take some of this burden themselves as well, then it becomes a political issue. And I don't think there's going to be a quick resolution to it either. I think this is going to rumble on, and there probably will be PR issues involved in all that as well. So it will be interesting who decides it and what they actually decide to do.
Yeah, it's a massively complicated situation, is it? Because it's almost like, where do you stop the line? You've got some Premier League players on maybe $500,000 a week at the very top end, and then you'll have some players at Norwich who, are on handsome amounts of money, but nowhere near that kind. And maybe they've just bought houses, they've got mortgages to pay, they've still got food to put on the table. It's like, where do you draw that line of having to give up your pay? On the other hand, Norwich have announced that they've given £200,000 that's been donated from player salaries and board members' salaries, etc., to community charities and such. Just talk us through that as well.
Yeah, so again, this has been ongoing for 2 or 3 weeks since the lockdown, really, in terms of what are Norwich City going to do to engage in the community and to help out, because they're in a privileged position, especially in terms of Norwich City in Norfolk. So I think they've been trying to work out what the best thing to do. What they came up with is as you say, it's a donation. It's created a pot of more than £200,000 that the club are going to make available to buy football on the mind, to buy food, toiletry essentials, and then initially, and then help distribute that to people in need across Norwich and Norfolk. They're going to give access to local communities and charities to work with getting that where it needs to go, and what needs to happen where. And they're going to get the Community Sports Foundation minibus out as well, so that's good. So I think. Again, I think that sort of, it's all very interconnected, isn't it? If players take massive pay cuts, who benefits from that? Are some chairmen desperate to just furlough staff to save a load of money rather than doing it because they're businessmen, rather than dealing with an actual situation that involves the whole of the community? People will look at huge amounts of money, like £100 million, and go, well, you've got £100 million, so surely you can save 10 grand and keep these guys in a job. Which is one point. The problem is, if you give most people 100 million quid, they probably spent it. And when it's football clubs, they've spent more than that, and probably what they're going to get next year. So they're just, it's such a difficult balancing act, and whether the rights or wrongs of that is just for a different debate. We're dealing in the present and what the current situation is now. So, it's brilliant that Norwich have done that. I saw something pop up that said Man United's players are the first to donate any of their salary. I don't think that's true. They've done that this afternoon. It's 30%, and that's hefty. But I think there are lots of things have come through from different clubs about what they're trying to do, and I think everyone wants to be seen to be doing the right thing. I think it was a great move from Norwich to do that yesterday. I think they have a community responsibility to do something like that. So good on them. Good that the board members as well got involved in that, and hopefully that will have a real tangible effect on the area, because we're in uncharted territory for us as a generation, and we've never seen anything like this, and we genuinely don't know what it'll look like on the other side. And I think we just need to try and look after each other as best we can, and hope we come out okay on the other side.
Definitely. I guess there's two things here. Is one, giving money to charity and helping people, for me, can only ever be seen as a positive. I always get baffled when people kind of take it the other way and go, oh, it's only 50% of their wages, etc., etc. And two, people keeping jobs is hugely important, and the furlough scheme has helped me keep a job. Granted, I don't work for Norwich City, but I work for a big company, and without it, I may have lost a job. So to keep people employed in Norfolk at Norwich City is hugely important.
I was just going to add, because again, we've been doing these coronavirus diaries with a player and a manager, and so I've been speaking to Paul Warren about that, and that will be up on the site in the next day or so. But again, he said it's I don't mind having the conversation with someone necessarily saying they're going to be furloughed, but if the alternative is me telling them they're going to be made redundant. And again, if you look at it with football clubs, for the criticism they're having, I guarantee you, if the furlough scheme wasn't there and they were desperate, they would just cut the jobs. Yeah. They wouldn't say, I'll tell you what, we're going to sell that player so we can keep all this staff on. It's just not going to happen. So again, in terms of comparison, that, it's I don't want to come on and defend. I feel like I've done a lot of defending, and all I'm trying to do is kind of inform and give the context. And this is similar, really. Whether it's right or wrong is not the question, but in that situation, I think that is what football clubs would do if they didn't have this option.
Definitely. I guess Norwich are in a situation now, being in the Premier League, that we are in a slight bubble. I was listening to George Ellick and Ali Maxwell on one of the Athletic podcasts the other week, and they were basically saying that for EFL clubs, there is a very real situation that 5 to 10 clubs will just not be here this time next year. Thankfully, that probably won't be the case for Norwich City, but we have to kind of look further afield, and hopefully these kind of things are helping them clubs somewhat. Let's talk about the rest of this season then. What happens? I've read so much over the past week because I haven't really had much else to do, I must admit. And there's been some absolutely outrageous suggestions of how we finish seasons, from playing it in China to a World Cup-esque kind of situation where we're playing in multiple games a day. I guess from my point of view, I honestly can't see how a season can be finished. You've got player contract issues, you've got massive legal battles with TV revenue, all of this stuff. From what you've seen, from what you've read, from the people you've talked to, where do you see things at the moment?
I think there's a lot of people who haven't got any idea. To be brutally honest, I think there's a lot of people keep just sort of sitting there like this. I think it was interesting what we saw across Europe yesterday in Belgium, and I guess I like the idea personally of a similar approach across the entirety of English football, but in terms of it being practical, I don't see how it is, and ultimately everything football has in terms of its influence and its power and its finances come from the TV and the broadcast deals, and at some point it probably, in a way, that's probably why this is all still up in the air, because ultimately they've paid a lot of money for something, and they're in danger of missing out on a quarter of it, basically. So I think that it's how that plans out is really difficult, because I think there's a really simple answer, but it doesn't work really for what football is and what it's evolved into. I get the impression that if the season doesn't complete, then relegating becomes very difficult, because you're depriving clubs of something they've got, and by all accounts that's more of a legal issue than not giving them something that they could possibly have. So if you want to be real black and white, I do think if the season doesn't complete, then I think Norwich will probably be in the Premier League next season, and I don't think there'd be any relegation in any of the divisions without there being a lot of legal action. So I think that's probably how that resolves. But again, I don't know if the TV companies let us resolve things like that. It was probably two or 3 weeks ago, I thought, just ram it all out in a tournament and away we go would be quite handy. But that's probably the fan in me who just thinks, well, that'd be the spectacle. We can make a proper show of it and all this sort of stuff. But when you start really thinking about what that would mean, and the workload then on players who do they have a pre-season? I spoke to Chris Domagala probably this time last week, it might have been, or something like that. I don't know what day it is, to be honest. And the longer the break goes on, then the longer it'll take to come back. But also, even with a long break in pre-season, you're still kind of giving people programs so that they're working up to a situation where they'll be fit. You can't really do that if you literally have no idea when you're going to come back. So it's really difficult in that regard. So you'd be putting, say playing a game every 3 days is fine in principle in the middle of a season, but when you're not sure how long people have been out for, it becomes a very different matter. Playing, I mean, can you really quarantine a load of footballers in the Midlands somewhere and play at a few select grounds? I mean, can you play behind closed doors and not expect your club's fans to turn up outside?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's going to happen. So I literally, I have no idea, and I know people are having these conversations who have got the power to make the final decisions.
And I guess
the same decision.
Yeah, I guess Norwich are in a kind of there's nothing to lose situation, in a sense that we're probably relegated. So the instant kind of thought in my head when I was hearing all this was, surely a null and void situation is positive for Norwich because we remain in the Premier League. But then you start to look at the finances, the amount of money you'd lose in TV revenue, etc., etc. What would be, and I know there probably isn't an ideal, but what would be the ideal situation for Norwich City out of all of this?
Well, I think ultimately everyone is going to have to compromise. I mean, that's what, no one is going to get what they thought they were going to get. So I imagine it might become very difficult to complete the season. I imagine it might become easier to try and start the next season at the same time and maybe work around that. And I imagine maybe there't a way of working around the TV contract. I have no idea if that's true. I'm just giving you my opinion. I think obviously that would work out. That would work out okay for the clubs if the financial settlement is kind of it isn't too. What's the word? It doesn't cause them too much grief, basically. And in fairness to Norwich, the longer there isn't football, the bigger the hole it leaves them.
Yeah.
But Norwich are well run. Their cloth is cut accordingly, and they are in a better situation than clubs like Bournemouth and Aston Villa, I would imagine, who have probably spent next year's TV money and possibly beyond that. So I think I think that's okay. But again, I mean, this is all kind of interconnected because we talk about furloughing and we talk about how clubs deal with this whole situation. I mean, I don't see how we just return to a situation after this if clubs have done what they've done, where they start shelling out, even modest transfer fees on players. Because how is that right? How does that factor into everything? So again, in terms of that, there will be compromises. There'll be compromises on a sporting basis, on a business basis, and there have to be compromises in what football looks like on the other side of it when clubs have made the decisions they've made, and also the players will have to come up with what they're going to do, because as I said, at the moment it's a commitment, but no one's really actually gone through what the commitment is in terms of them helping out staff and local causes.
I assume we have timescales of when we can start to go back into the public. It's really tough to plan. And will teams be willing to compromise? I don't know. It's a massively complicated situation. Let's get on to some Twitter questions, Michael. I tweeted out and asked some people to get their questions in. The first is from Timu. Now, I'm assuming it's not Timu Pookie, although if it is, hello Timu. He says, any details on the rumoured signing of Danel Sinani? His goal contribution to game ratio seems absolutely incredible. Now, Michael, I actually don't know who Danel Sinani is. I've seen his name pop up a few times. So for me as well, who is he and what's this rumoured signing all about?
Yes, so Danel Sinani was first linked with Norwich in the January transfer window.
I've completely missed that.
Yeah, that's fine, don't worry. Lots happened since then, by the way.
Yeah.
He plays his football in the domestic league in Luxembourg. And now I haven't really delved into all my research and I can't remember the name of the club at the moment. And if I did, I would probably not be able to pronounce it. But he's playing there. More to the point, he played in the Europa League and caught the eye, and I think in terms of Norwich's interest and what the analysts and recruitment team have dug out, they've spotted something in those games probably that has made them feel that he's got a bit of talent and something to offer. it's probably, and it is far harder to judge that when you're looking at what you're doing in the domestic league in Luxembourg, because the level just isn't really there to compare it. It's so hard. Dudelange, F91 Dudelange.
Have we ever signed someone from the domestic leagues of Luxembourg?
No, and I doubt any player from Luxembourg has played for Norwich. Historically, I would find that hard. In fact, it would be interesting. The highest performing Luxembourgian, I don't know the word, in terms of playing in the English leagues, what level they've reached, I don't know.
I'm sure our good friend Nancy FC Numbers will pick out some academy player from 72 or something to
see. You'd hope so. Young man. He's impressed in in his Europa League performances last year. He has done well domestically, and clearly a lot of people think a lot of him. He is out of contract in the summer, and because of his age, there would be no compensation. So he was being linked in January. But as far as I know, and I have to be honest, I've known this for a while, and I kind of assumed it was common knowledge. So when the stuff popped up from Luxembourg yesterday about him, oh yeah, he's got a contract, I was like, well, yeah, I just assumed it had been out. So yes, he's signed a pre-contract. He'll be at Norwich next season, as far as I'm concerned. And I think that started to come out at his end, probably because of what's been going on with the coronavirus. So as far as I'm aware, there's a contract there. He'll be at Norwich next season. He's a young man. But I think the thing with Norwich is they can't get him in the building to get him training with the first team here until he's a Norwich player. So I think they're going to need to have a look at him, see how he does. I think they appreciate it's a bit of a gamble because it's such a small sample size in terms of how he's really impressed against better opposition. He might just take to it and you're like, yeah, you're a player. Or he might be like, yeah, okay, well, you're a bit raw. Let's send you out for a bit and see how you get on at a higher level than what you were playing at, which probably isn't difficult, to be honest, given the Luxembourg domestic league. So, but he's a young attacking midfielder. I think he's got similarities to Teemu Pukki, actually, in terms of the positions he plays and positions he gets in. I think he can play off the last man, and if you look at some of his past goals, he does score goals that Teemu was scoring last year. So I think I have to say, it's not often I see clips of a player, but he was one of them, and I sort of, I'm getting a bit excited about it. I look excited, but I'm hugely tempered by the level he's been playing at. I think everyone has to make sure that he gets a bit of time, and then if he shows us something exceptional, we can all be really, really excited about it. So we'll see. Yeah, but the tweet I should have put out about 3 weeks ago is, I think he'll be a Norwich player next year. I'm like 99.6% sure of that. So yeah,
very exciting. That sounds good. Okay, Chris Mower asks, would a Sunderland Till I Die style documentary at Norwich make interesting viewer, or would it be a bit duller? Now, I haven't seen the second series of the Sunderland Till I Die documentary. I saw the first season. I think Netflix had hoped that it was kind of from the bottom right to the top kind of style. Instead, they'd just stayed there where they were at the start. Surely it would be very interesting viewing if they did a similar style at Norwich, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be really interesting because it's always even with the club videos that they put out, they clearly get access that not many other people get. So you just sometimes see the odd conversation or the odd interaction, and especially when someone like me, reasonably close to the club, you still see bits you haven't seen. You're like, oh, okay, that's interesting, and maybe got a bit more context. So that sort of stuff would be really good. It is difficult with those, though, isn't it? Because let's be honest, the Sunderland first season was compelling viewing because it was a car crash. The Manchester City documentary, I mean, that was really interesting, but incredibly polished. So you've got to bear in mind what the narratives are and what people want you to think. Even in the Sunderland documentary, they will know who they're going to paint as the villain, and it sometimes, I think, can be difficult to get a bit of character shade in there. So, and again, I haven't seen the second season, but I'm kind of looking forward to it. And the Tottenham documentary, I mean, you think about what's happened to that club since they started filming, that's going to be fascinating as well. So I don't know, there isn't much that, oh, someone joining me, it's my wife, live on Skype, there's my wife. No, she's not going to say hello, but she does exist now, you all know. And it could have been my 2-year-old, so we should be grateful. Or shall I share these? I've got some apple. I've just been put on Snap. This is one of the benefits of home working. Home working for my wife more than me, because I've been here for 6 months. I can't even remember what I was saying, but yeah, I think with the documentary, it doesn't strike me many well-run clubs have a documentary done about them, but maybe that's a football thing, and that's quite hard on Spurs, because Spurs were pretty well run until they started a documentary, maybe. I
think I'd much rather watch an Ipswich Town documentary from this season rather than any Norwich documentary. That would be compelling viewing. Right, the final question comes in from Marcus. Let's take away all knowledge, all legalities, everything, but he simply asks, would you rather the season doesn't continue and we stay up, or it does continue, we go down, but win the FA Cup?
Oh my gosh!
I must admit, I completely forgot the FA Cup was still a thing. By the way, we were progressing.
That is basically just the question of would you rather get relegated or win the FA Cup, isn't it? It's just an added tier. I hate that. I hate with the coronavirus verb. Yeah, I hate that question. I hate that question before all this. I mean, I do wish the season would be finished, because that is kind of what should happen. I mean, I don't. I suppose the fan in me is like, yeah, winning the FA Cup. You know, Norwich are pretty wretched in the FA Cup, really. To only have been in the semi-finals twice and never been to an FA Cup final, it would be epic to win the FA Cup. But I mean, that is so phenomenally hard. And in terms of the long-term footings of the football club, to stay up would be infinitely more beneficial to them. So I'd probably rather end up in the Premier League next year, and that's not because I get to eat food at Premier League grounds. By the way, that's because of the footing. I think fans can trust what the people in charge of the club have done in terms of the financial footings, and I think it would be really interesting to see if they could do that with more money. I actually think they've probably got 1 or 2 bits to prove off the back of last summer, actually, as well. So I'd like to see that, maybe, rather than lifting the FA Cup. Probably because I wouldn't trust them not to just get to the final and lose.
Yeah, that would be incredibly painful, wouldn't it? Definitely. Yeah. Michael, thank you. I've kept you a bit longer than I said. Go and enjoy your apple crisps and whatever you've got going on for the rest of the day. For everyone that doesn't know about The Athletic, and where have you been, head over there. Links in the description. You can get 50% off if you're already signed up. Head over there and check out all of the latest writing about the coronavirus in Norwich City. It's compelling, to say the least. Michael, thank you, and I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.